This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I am your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media accounts, my columns at the 6035media.org website, my other podcast, my photography website, and all that other kind of good stuff, social media, email list, contact me, whatever you want to know. It's all at hikingbob.com, even stuff you don't want to know, hikingbob.com. And also, before I go, if you'd like to help support this podcast, you can do that at Patreon, patreon.com/hikingbob. There are rewards for different levels of support, and we'd be happy to have you as a supporter of this podcast and help pay the bills and help us buy new equipment, do all kinds of good stuff like that. So check all that stuff out, hikingbob.com. Today with me is Susan Davies, the Executive Director of the Trails and Open Space Coalition. Hi, Susan.
Hi, and is it okay for me to say I'm a supporter?
Absolutely. Thank you. You
of
are
course.
a supporter. Thank you.
I am a proud supporter.
She is. Susan is one of my favorite supporters over at Patreon, and I appreciate that you are a supporter alongside so many other people.
I only support quality, so there you go.
Well, and even me. So it's all good. Well, thank you so much for being one of my supporters. I do appreciate it. The topic today was, we had you on not too long ago while the Give campaign was going on. But the topic today is issue 1. We're so used to having letters after these numbers.
Exactly.
So it's actually the only thing on the ballot after a bazillion candidates for various offices. But it's the only issue on the ballot, issue 1 on the Colorado Springs ballot in April, which is an extension of the Trails, Open Space, and Parks program, popularly known as the TOPS program.
Yes, and we're thrilled to get this opportunity. You know, there's so much we could say about TOPS, yeah. and it's so exciting to be able to, first of all, put it on the ballot before the expires in 2025.
Which is really soon.
And we need to talk about why that's so important at some point. But you know, people are going to have lots of choices this April if you live in Colorado Springs. You know, there are a lot of council member seats. There's the mayoral election. But one issue that it's so important that you vote. And it's I would argue, the only nonpartisan issue really on the ballot. Right. I mean, council is not supposed to be partisan, but it is what it is. But this is something that goes across party lines. It doesn't matter what party you belong to. It is all about how much you love parks, trails, and open space. And if you do, and if you use them, or if you drive by them, or if you just live here, you should learn what is at stake.
Right. Absolutely. And you know, I've been here since before the TOPS program exists. It's been 25 years. Last year, 2022 was the 25 years anniversary of the TOPS program. And I just think about what wouldn't be here. And I think that's the best message we can send people. These are places, and I'm going to rattle off a few of them, that if you have hiked there or spent an afternoon there with your family, walking the dog, having a picnic or something like that, or just enjoying the wildflowers in the spring and the fall colors in the fall, these are places that I'm going to name that would not be there, would not be under public ownership if it wasn't for the TOPS program. Stratton Open Space, the first place that they bought into this program, right next to North Cheyenne Canyon Park. That's number one. Probably the biggest and most famous, Red Rock Canyon Open Space. One of the most insanely busy, I shouldn't say, busy is not a good word, one of the most insanely popular open spaces in the region because it's so big and has such a variety of trails and environments. It's open areas at the bottom. At the south end of it, it's more forested and a little higher in elevation. There's an old quarry there. There's all kinds of neat features there.
And it attracts people who ride horses, people who are on bicycles, and people who are running, walking with kids, whatever.
Right. I mean, it has some nice hiker-only trails over on the far west side, the Contemplative Trail. It is one of the most iconic examples of things that this program has done, with things that it has purchased. So that's a great one. The Blodgett Peak Open Space. Now, the peak is not part of it because it's outside, but all that land underneath of it that borders up the Forest Service land.
And that we've actually added to.
We actually just added to it. The Pikeview Quarry buffer property around the bottom there, and the Black Canyon property around the other side, which, by the way, is going to finally provide access to Waldo Canyon, which has been closed to the fire. These are things that it's purchased. Corral Bluffs, which has turned out to be the home of some insanely rare, actually doesn't exist anywhere on Earth, archaeological or paleontological sites that we've actually found. Like, we've always joked about, no, that guy looks like he's the missing link or something like that. We actually found part of the missing link out there that exists nowhere else on Earth. Would not be there if it wasn't for this program. Blue Stem Prairie Open Space, which is a pretty cool place. Cyclists really like it. Wildlife is out there. Would not exist. And a good chunk of Cheyenne Mountain State Park, just to the south of us, would not exist without the TOPS. This TOPS money was used to buy a lot of it at the beginning, and has since been used to add on to it.
Now let's talk about parks. Venezia Park, beloved on the north side.
Yeah, beautiful park.
Panorama Park, oh my gosh.
Yep.
It, again, was supported by TOPS.
Right.
America the Beautiful Park.
Right.
Wildflower Park, which is one of my favorite little parks. There are truly dozens of parks that were either built by TOPS or supported by TOPS and wouldn't exist today. Now talk trails.
Yeah, trails. You've got the trails too. I'm thinking about like the Homestead Trail. A lot of that is TOPS property. Some of the Cottonwood Trail, I believe, is some TOPS property. Some of the Monument, the Greenway Valley,
Pikes Peak Greenway.
That's the word I'm looking for. Trail. Some of that is that. So this
Midland Trail.
A lot of that is park. You mentioned the parks. TOPS doesn't entirely build parks, but a certain percentage of it is allowed to go to help that. So it helps fund those parks that maybe general fund support wasn't quite enough to get it done, so TOPS could help support it.
And it provides the seed money. And many times you have to have that match that then Great Outdoors Colorado swoops in and helps finish the project, or TPL finishes the project. But if you don't have that beginning pool of money, the project goes nowhere.
Or it helps fund the master planning that always has to be done when we build these new parks and open spaces and stuff like that.
Coleman Park, now this is being planned, when it's going to be time to build in the next few years, TOPS will help support that process. It won't pay for it, but it'll help support it.
Absolutely. So it's important for people to understand what's going on here. And I always like to talk about when I first came to Colorado Springs, and it's not like, well, it was better when I was here, when I first got here. I'm not going to get into that argument, but when I moved here in 1991, there was 250-ish thousand people in Colorado Springs. The city ended basically, for all intents and purposes, even before you got to Powers Boulevard. Powers Boulevard was a 4-lane road that went nowhere. To the city, it kind of went to the airport. The airport wasn't even, the terminal wasn't where it is now. I mean, there's a lot of change here. So now let's move fast forward 30 some odd years, and now we are at 500,000 plus people, whatever the census said. It's going to be around 500,000 people. And in the interim, the TOPS program went into effect, bought property, gained easements, things like that, that if we didn't have that, you would have, I firmly believe this, nothing but concrete from the foothills to Falcon.
Absolutely. We would be a sea of housetops, roofs.
Concrete jungle, like I like to call it.
Right. And that has so many implications. For example, when you have an open space, suddenly now you don't have the water requirements. You don't have all those households that are flushing toilets and using showers. So open space helps our water supply. Open space, when you mitigate the forest through the open space, suddenly now you have a safer forest adjacent, and the neighbors around are safer because now you've managed and controlled some of that. When you think about our air quality, the trees in those forests help with our air quality. Plus, the economic benefits they bring in terms of the tourists that come, the families that use those resources instead of having to pay to use those resources. I mean, it just goes on and on and on how TOPS has enriched this community.
Well, and people move here. One of the reasons why I moved here, more than 30 years ago, was I liked the quality of life here. It was a wide open town, and there was a lot of recreational opportunities. And people are still moving here for that reason. I'm not going to get into a whole growth discussion here, but let's admit that this has helped manage growth better than if we didn't have it.
Totally.
And it has helped really make Colorado Springs a more enjoyable place to live. It's done so much good for the community. So all we're asking now with this next election is to extend it for 20 more years.
And that's important to do it, first of all, now, because there are projects coming up. I mean, you are the chair of the TOPS Working Committee, and, it's important for people to know that there are projects that come up that you need to be able to act now or lose. And by having 20 years of guaranteed funding for this program, we can plan forward. We can be visionary and make some of these big necessary expenditures to save this property and count on a revenue source for 20 years.
Right. And I will say that all opinions are my own and not any
I apologize,
organizations
but
that I belong to. No, that's
you're
okay.
doing
I just want to make that
right. Yes.
just in case somebody says anything.
Yes.
Everybody listening to this knows these are my own opinions.
They know.
The best part about this is it's such a small impact. 1 cent out of every $10.
Yes, it's nothing.
So it's a small one, and there's no increase in this.
Right.
In this proposal.
And yet we have the smallest TOPS tax up and down the Front Range, but nonetheless, it is that a mighty penny that is doing good work and needs to continue.
And I will just say that fact, when I was asked why we're not asking for an increase, my argument has been that we are accomplishing everything that we want to accomplish. So there didn't seem to be any need at the moment. We can always go back if we have to. There wasn't any need at the moment, any pressing need to increase the rate. We were accomplishing what the TOPS program is intended to accomplish with the funds it brings in now. So it was like, well, and I'll pick a little bit on my friends in government, but any government official will tell you there's never enough money, never enough people. But we looked at that and said, we haven't not been able to do anything we wanted to do with the funds that we're drawing on this. So there wasn't any pressing need. The beauty of the TOPS program is it's all citizen driven. It's citizen, and I mean, there's obviously, staff at the Parks Department, and everything has to go through City Council because it is tax money. They have to approve any expenditures. But this started out, and let's go back to the history here. This started out as a citizen-driven petition drive to get this program on the ballot to the voters.
Because there wasn't the political will at the time for City Council to put it on themselves. So this was an arduous process to go out and get signatures to put something on a ballot, even though there were fewer people back then. So it was a little bit easier. But nonetheless, they failed the first time.
Right.
And then they went back a second time and they sort of just won. So I have so much respect for those folks. Now, my organization, which I did not lead at the time, was very much part of that effort. My predecessor, Dan Cleveland, was part of that effort. Those were visionary people that said, we can have all the plans we want, but if we don't have money to conserve this land, we got nothing. Right. So I give them so much credit, and now it's our turn to carry on that legacy.
Absolutely. And, and then let's just give people an overview on how this TOPS program works. So if you're new here, or maybe you're not clear on the details, let's just give you an idea how it works. Number one, it's 0.1%, so it's 1 cent on every $10. That money's collected by the city. It can only go into the TOPS fund because it's again, this is the way the voters approved it. Off the top, about 3% is taken off for administration and 6% is taken off for maintenance. So we'll start off with that at the top. That comes off the very top. Out of the remaining, 60% minimum is used for the open space category. And then out of the other 40%, 20% is used for trails and 20% is used for parks. And that's what the program does. And that's how it's spent. Primarily, it was designed as a method of acquiring land for preservation and open space. The land has to be sold by a willing buyer, so there's no eminent domain. Nobody takes land from anybody, doesn't want to sell it. We don't buy it. We don't force anybody to buy it. We get a fair valuation on the property. We're required by the ordinance to only pay fair market value. So there's numerous, or at least several appraisals done. And that's the word I was looking for. Appraisals done of the property. And if the buyer agrees, then the city purchases it. And before that happens, staff at the Parks Department has an evaluation process. Sometimes property may be proposed, and anybody can propose a land. It doesn't have to be the owner. The owner may not want to sell it. It may not be suitable. We may end up with a piece of land that may not be suitable for a number of reasons. It may require a lot of work to get it to where it's usable. We don't want to do that necessarily. There's a list of things. They then bring it to the TOPS Working Committee. That's a subset of the Parks Advisory Board. From there, they look at it, and every member is required to go visit the property. If they don't, they're not allowed to vote on it. So they have to actually go out and see it and get an idea of what this land. And usually it's a group thing with the Parks Department going out there. Typically, if we can, the landowner goes out there with us, answers questions. We look at this property. And for me, it's more touchy-feely. Does it look like a piece of land that that I can envision people hiking through or biking through or something like that. Then if, after that process, it's brought up to the TOPS working committee, who then makes a recommendation on whether or not the city should purchase this property. From there, it goes to the Parks Advisory Board. They do the same thing. They have to evaluate it. They look at our recommendation, see if we added anything special to it, anything we wanted to see. If they approve it, to recommend it, it then goes to City Council, because like I said, they're the elected officials. This is tax money. They have to approve any expenditures. If they agree, then the land is then purchased.
It's a process.
It's a process. And the beauty of that process is there's checks and balances in there. That, everybody knows, everybody has seen the property, everybody has known what it's evaluated as. Everybody can judge for themselves whether they think this is a good expenditure of the taxpayers' hard-earned money that they're putting into this fund.
And I would argue, because that process is somewhat complicated and it takes time.
Yeah.
We don't have any dogs. I mean, when you really look at the portfolio of open space acquisitions, as well as the trails that have been connected or extended or whatever, and the parks that have been built, this has been such a thoughtful process that so many people look around and say, oh my gosh, there's no city like this. Nobody has what we have. And that's kudos to the volunteers and the staff that put the time in. I mean, I can remember during the time that I have been, attending all of these TOPS working committee meetings, there have been applications that came in that everybody went, yeah, it maybe meets this criteria or this criteria, but no, it doesn't meet this, and this, so it doesn't get in.
Right.
And those were good choices. They're not easy choices, but those were good choices, because at the end of the day, we need to think about the conservation values of that property as well as the recreation values, and think about, is this going to be the right choice given the price, and the prices are going up all the time, for us, the next generation? Right. Is this something we'll be proud of 50 years from now? Right, exactly. And I can tell you that I've been on the TOPS working committee now for, I think I've been close to 7 years now. So I'm sorry, 5 years. I have about a year or so left to be on there. Let's start off with the members of the TOPS working committee and the Park Advisory Board are term limited, just like elected officials are. Even though we're not elected, we're appointed. We are term limited, so we can't stay there forever. So that always makes sure there's new people coming in there. But there have been proposals that either staff has rejected them outright because they were just not suitable, or when they come to the TOPS working committee and the Park Advisory Board, there are hard questions that are asked. Let's talk about the latest proposed acquisition, 1,000 acres of land by the time this airs, probably will be very close to being approved by City Council, if not already being approved. 1,000 acres of land on the east side of town. Probably one of our biggest purchases. And possibly our last big purchase. That broke my heart when Britt said that the other day, but I think she's probably right. Yeah. Wild Horse Ranch. Right. 1,000+ acres, east side of town, which desperately needs some more open space out there because it butts up to the county and they don't have a TOPS program. And it actually is county land. It actually is county land, but the private owner is selling it to us. And a lot of, when we went out there and visited it, and I'll be honest with you, when you look at it right now, the pictures, But we've had staff has taken a step further. They said, well, they've talked to people, and I should go back and say that it looks because it's been used for cattle. Right. So it's been, as you can imagine, it's been overgrazed, tromped on, and everything. But the staff has talked to people who are experts in prairie grasses and said, will this grow back? Because one of the questions I had was, are we going to have to spend another $1 million to seed this, or what's it going to do? The answer we got, because we talked to experts, was no, it should grow back. We're just going to need to give it a little time and get the cattle off of it. Fair enough. Questions are asked about these things. How are we going to have access? People who sit on these committees are smart people. In the Park Advisory Board, they're smart people. They know the questions asked. They never fail to remember that they are also taxpayers. This is also their money that's being spent, and they want it spent properly. And I talked to some of the old timers, like say a Steve Harris, who's back on the TOPS working committee now. Oh, Parks Advisory Board. And Steve shared with us that when Blue Stem Prairie became available, that people went out there and went, they were not impressed. Right. And wise people said, you know what, this special piece of land with all these interesting grasses and all this cool the pronghorn that are using
Right.
this and the birds that are using the water over here. This will be surrounded by houses within so many years. And so if we don't save this now, this too will be a mass of houses.
Right.
How true they were.
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty piece of land. It's not my favorite place to hike, but every time I go out there, I'm charmed and I say, why don't I come more often?
Right.
And for the people that live in that area, that's their open space. So we have to be cognizant of that.
And if you're familiar with Blue Stem Prairie, it looked then what Wild Horse Ranch looks like now. So
Exactly.
acknowledging that it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's going to come back. And it's actually going to connect wildlife corridors. So from
And there's a
Corral
little
Bluff.
pond,
It's got a little pond there, Corral Bluffs.
Birds.
To across the street to Wild Horse Ranch, to around the bottom to Blue Stem Prairie. Those antelope will have a place to go.
So thank heavens it's not a political popularity contest decision, that you have smart people with an environmental background that are thinking equal parts stewardship, serving the wildlife, serving the bird population, as well as how does it serve the greater population.
Right.
And I'm so grateful for that.
Right. And we look at all these things. What are the recreation opportunities going to be that are going to be there? And these are open spaces, so that's important for people to know. These are not parks that we're buying with this land. And we support parks, but they're not parks that are buying this land. So what these purchases are is they're going to be a lot like Blue Stem Prairie. They're not going to have manicured fields and baseball diamonds and things like that. They're going to be wide open with natural growing grasses and trails.
A parking lot, some signage lot, as you say, trails, and that's it.
Hopefully a bathroom.
Hopefully.
I'm still working with Parks
Okay.
Department on
I'd
getting
like
more
that.
bathrooms.
I'd like that. But you're right. And remember, and I'd like to get into some of what a few of the naysayers, unfortunately there aren't very many, are
Yeah.
saying. But I want to say this. Remember, because we do get this organizationally, don't buy any more if you can't take care of what you have. Okay, remember that taking care of open space is one of the best bargains around. I can remember when our former head of maintenance for the whole system said, to take care of an acre of open space costs us about maybe $75 per acre per year, as opposed to a neighborhood park, which can cost as much as $12,000 per acre per year. Well, that's because you have water, you have to mow it, you have to check the playground, you have to replace the sports courts. All of that adds up. Whereas with open space, really, it's just taking care of the parking lot, taking care of the trails. It's such an easier proposition.
And it's not to say that, your neighborhood park obviously has a place in our society and a place you need a place like that in your neighborhood, but these open spaces give you more room, a bigger place to go, a more natural experience. So these things are all very important. Let's talk a little bit about that. There's a fringe in the community that wants to say, for example, that this, regardless of what the election says, city council or whomever can do whatever they want with the money and spend it in whatever percentages they want. Not true.
Not true. That nothing could be further from the. This is a voted upon ordinance. This is something. This is a law.
Right.
So it would be completely illegal for the next city council to come in and say, yeah, that's all fine and good, but we're going to use all that money for this. They couldn't do it. Right. I mean, they would be sued. Bad things would happen. It just couldn't happen. So what you read or see is what you get.
And the proof of that is that every time there's been a change, which has been some minor changes this over the year, they've all been required to go to the people to get a vote to get that done.
Right.
So regardless of what some people are saying, well, there's some confusion about specific money allocated for specific things by ordinance, such as this. It specifies there's 1 cent in every $10 has to go to this fund. It has to be used for these purposes. It has to be divided up in these percentages. That has to be that way because the voters asked for it. Now, when you're talking about general fund money that comes out of just general tax revenue, you can't quite do that because every city council has as not only their right, but as their obligation to budget money year to year as they see fit. This does not fall under that. So when people say, well, you can't hold council to that in the future, you actually can because this is in money intended specifically for that purpose. It's not like the general fund. We can't tell the current city council can't tell the next one, you can only spend 50% of this amount of money on this project because you can't do it. They have a right to and a bill and an obligation to adjust the ballot, but this does not apply to that.
No.
This is completely separate. This is not general fund money, and they cannot change the percentages.
Think of your own household. In your own household, you have discretionary, and you have non-discretionary money. So in our house, for
my fun
example,
money.
right. In our household, the mortgage has to be paid. It's
Absolutely.
the first thing that has to be paid every month. And there's not a thing we can do about that, or we're going to lose our house.
Right.
This is the same thing. This is a special fund that has to be used for a very specific purpose that no amount of wishing is going to change it. So exactly what the voters are voting for issue 1 in April, that is what will carry this program forward for 20 years.
It's exactly what it says it is. Nobody can change that. If they try to,
They got to go to vote of the people.
Well, or if they try to do it without that, the legal ramifications from that are many,
Yes.
and can be quite harsh.
Yes.
Let's talk about another one that we keep hearing is the Pikeview Quarry property. Now, the city does not, contrary to popular belief, the city has not owned the quarry. We've purchased the land around it, at the bottom of it, that was set to become a bunch of houses. And we'll talk about this not being an anti-development project. But in any case, there's some rumor going around that the city is going to have to spend $20 million to reclaim the quarry to make it safe to use. Not true.
No.
The city doesn't own the quarry property. The owner of the quarry property is spending probably close to $20 million to reclaim it, and it has to meet very specific standards set by the state's mining department, and it has to satisfy a lot of different people that it's safe and it's going to be able to use. Only at that time will it be turned over for free to the city. If it does not meet anybody's acceptable, and the city could refuse it for any reason. They just said, we don't like it. Right. We're not going to take it from you, and the landowner still has it. So there's a rumor going around that the city is going to spend $20 million to rehab the quarry. Completely, unequivocally, flat out. I will tell you right now, not only is it a false, but it's a lie. It just is not true. It's not set in any standard. Nobody has ever said the city was spending $20 million up there. So let's get that out of the way.
Good.
But that is a TOPS project. That is a piece of top property. If we do accept it, if it is reclaimed to not only the state standards and our standards, and it's checked regularly by independent contractors who go out there, and those independent surveyors who go out there, they're signing their license away on those observations and measurements they make. They're not going to lie, because if something goes wrong, their licensure is up for grabs. They could lose it if they are found to be fudging things. So they're not fudging things. These people have a life. They want a career they've spent a lot of time going to school for. They're not out there to do the bidding of the landowner. They're out there to get it right.
Right. Exactly. So I think that's really important. I've also heard, the term slush fund thrown around a lot.
Right.
And, there was some concern with the last time around that there was too much flexibility allowed the program and there wasn't enough, guarantees. All right, let's put all that behind us. Let's look at this, what will be before voters. So their only changes to this TOPS ordinance compared to what you've been having for the last 25 years is exactly what we said before, that 75% of the open space category must be used for acquisition. And again, we have been assured by staff that that is not going to hurt the program. Good. The second thing that's going to change is the fact that right now, a TOPS trail purchased by TOPS money then gets TOPS maintenance money. Well, that's going to change so that any trail within our city system is going to be eligible. Now, they'll still go through a vetting process, but it's not like you're going to have this piece of the Sand Creek Trail that was bought with TOPS money nicely taken care of, and then the next half mile is going to be crumbling because it wasn't bought with TOPS money. I mean, that doesn't serve the using public. It doesn't serve staff. It serves nobody, and certainly not the resource. So we're going to change that if this wins and allow that any open space, whether it was donated or purchased by TOPS money, is allowed to be eligible for TOPS ongoing funding, which is huge. I love that we're doing that because we did it with parks back in 2013. It overwhelmingly passed. And I'll sit here right now and tell you that my organization was really nervous about that. We didn't like it. We said, no. That should be taken care of by general fund money. No, let's keep TOPS money for TOPS properties. And we have watched over the last 10 years how well that has worked.
Right.
And again, at the end of the day, what are you trying to do? You're trying to serve the public and you're trying to serve the resource. And truly, I think these changes will do both.
And this affects a small percentage of the trails, small percentage of parks. A primary example of a park that gets this kind of weird funding is Ute Valley Park. The west half of Ute Valley Park is what I like to call a legacy park. It's been there for many, many years. The east half of it was bought a few years back with TOPS money and GOCO money and all that kind of stuff. They're treated differently. This is going to let them be treated all the same because the average user, A, probably doesn't realize, and B, really doesn't care how it's funded. They're out there to enjoy, and they go from one end of the park to the other. I did that just the other day with my dog. They go out there from one end of the park to the other. They don't care how it's done. They just want to get done. This evens out the playing field a little bit, and it only affects a small percentage of the total amount of funding that goes in there. It's not like it's going to take away a lot of funding. This is a very tiny percentage of it. It's only going to affect specific places. And getting to how the money is spent, the capital improvement budget is a budget that's presented to the TOPS Working Committee for approval and then goes to the Park Advisory Board for approval. So projects that the city wants to work on, the Parks Department staff wants to work on, have to be brought to the TOPS Working Committee and the Park Advisory Board and City Council for approval. So it's not like this is being done in the shadows. And all this stuff is discussed in open meetings. They get 2 meetings before, I believe 2 meetings in most cases before it's approved. Everybody gets to look at it. We're a list of projects, how much they're going to cost. During the year, supplemental appropriations can be made if something new comes up. And we've done that before. We've had, something changes and we have to reallocate money or move things around. All that is done in a public process. None of this is done without public input by the committees and boards and elected officials that are there. Even a change in that has to be done by elected officials.
Let's talk about what would happen, Bob, if for some horrible reason this doesn't win in April. Let's be real honest about this. Right. If this does not win, we're going to have a lot of new members of City Council. We're going to have a brand new mayor. This mayor that we have now, John Suthers, has committed to getting this done. He was not pleased last time. He takes it personally, which I'm delighted by, and he is going to get this done. But let's just say it would, for some reason, fail in April. Okay, I don't know that we would have time between now and the end of 25 to get it on the ballot again. This is our second shot.
Well, there's no April ballot after that.
Well, that's right. So then we're going to have to go to the November ballot, which would be A, more expensive, and B, more problematic because now you have a presidential. I mean, you've got a lot going on. So I think it would really hurt the program's potential for it to continue. Okay, so let's say TOPS dies. No more open space. Right. No more money for trails except for what we get from PPRTA 3 and a few other little places. But essentially, you will see development take over. Any piece of valuable property, and believe me, if you go back to the 2014 Parks Master Plan, there are still candidate open spaces on all sides of the city that we would love to secure once we have a willing seller. So instead of just waiting like we could with 20 years to pounce on those and make them available to everybody, now we're dead in the water.
Right.
And they're all houses. And once they're gone, they're gone. So I think it would be absolutely devastating to the well-being, the quality of life of this city as it's growing to be the fastest city and county in the state of Colorado if TOPS dies.
Right. Absolutely. And not only that, would we not have money to purchase it, but we would also lose all that money that's used for maintenance and stewardship of the properties we've already bought.
Exactly. So everything we have, imagine Red Rock Open Space, which is such a shining, we're so proud of it. And with the lovely new signs that are going on, and there's going to be all this wonderful trail work done in the next 6 months.
Big project coming up this year.
Wonderful improvements. All of a sudden, it's going to be tarnished and shoddy. And I mean, our friends groups do amazing work, but some of it they can't do.
They don't have millions of dollars.
Right. And so this would be as good as it's going to be forever. That just breaks my heart.
Yeah, that's
not acceptable.
A pretty bleak outlook. So,
but people need to think about that. That's why they need to get their neighbors, their friends, their family members to take to the time to vote, understand the issues, and vote yes for issue 1.
Yep, absolutely. I think we've pretty much made our case that this should be the thing people should vote for.
I think so, and I would also encourage people to come to a TOPS Working Committee meeting. Right. They're the first Wednesday of every month, 7:30 in the morning. It's a little early. They don't last that long, though, so that's pretty nice.
Move those meetings along.
So much. Great chairman right now. And it's really a treat to see all these people that are completely committed to making this program as great as it can be. And I think you have a couple openings right now for alternates. Not right now. There will be down the road, though.
We're full up.
Okay, you're full. Good. But I mean, put that in the back of your mind. Maybe that's something you do want to do in a year or two or something, is to, put some public service and take your turn and really get involved and show your passion for what you care about.
Absolutely. Well, Susan, thank you so much. You guys have been a great public advocate for the TOPS program since the beginning. You guys have really been a great help to it. You personally have been a great supporter of this program. I've been a supporter since before I was where I'm at now, and will continue to be into the foreseeable future. And this is an issue that we need to get on the ballot. I think if you talk to people, they're going to say, I'm spending a penny on every $10. That's all it is. Not bad. So I think we're doing pretty well. Let's keep this program going for another till 2045.
Sounds good to me.
I'll be 10 years dead by then.
Me too. But my daughter, who is 23 almost, and I fully expect she may come back to live here. Right. And why? It's because of our beautiful trails and open space. That's why people do stay or move here.
And I'll touch on one more thing. This is a sales tax, not a property tax or anything like that. So the beauty of that is people who come here to visit and use these parks are also helping to support these parks and trails.
And all of us that live out in the county also are supporting it. Because when we come here and spend our money on restaurants or whatever, we are supporting it. And that's why we feel very special using it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Susan, thank you so much again for spending time with me and talking about this very important topic. And if you're a voter here in Colorado Springs, issue 1 on the April ballot, vote yes.
See you on Election Day.
See you there. Thanks for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.